I will talk to you a little bit about pitching, which is presenting your company. It's not necessarily just on stage, but in lots of different places. Before we do that, I'm going to take a quick picture of my beautiful audience today. Everybody smile. Say hi to Twitter. All right. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Davis. This is Ron calling you from the Daily News. How you doing this morning?
It's Davis, and I'm not interested.
Okay, I'm sorry to bother you. Have a nice day.
Wait a minute. Wait, that's your pitch? You consider that a sales call?
Well,
You know, I get a call from you guys every Saturday, and it's always the same half-assed attempt. If you guys want to close me, you should sell me.
all right.
All right, start again.
Okay. Hi. This is Ron from the Daily News. How you doing this morning?
Shitty, what do you want?
It's not what I want, sir. It's what you want.
Ron, now we're talking. All right, what are you selling me?
I'm offering you a subscription to the Daily News at a substantially reduced price. We're trying to reach out to people that have never had home delivery before.
Right, so basically you're saying that everybody else who already has a subscription is getting fucked on this one?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right, well, I can handle that. So tell me, why should I buy your paper? I mean, you know, I mean, why shouldn't I get the Times or the Voice, you know?
Well, the Village Voice is free, sir. So if you want it, you should certainly pick it up. But the Daily News offers you something no other paper can. A real taste of New York. We have the best features, more photographs than any other daily in New York, and we have the most reliable delivery in the city. Now, what do you think?
You know what I think, Ron? I think that was a sales call. Good job, buddy.
So you're going to buy a subscription?
No, I already get the Times.
All right. So that is a pitch. Who knows that movie? Boiler Room. Highly recommend you watch Boiler Room. Highly recommend you watch Glengarry Glen Ross. These are classic movies about sales. Pitching is storytelling with a sales call to action, okay? So when you're pitching your startup, you're going to be talking to investors, you're going to be talking to a lot of different people, customers, your family, etc. So some of you may know who I am, some may not. I'll give you a quick brief. I do a lot of mentoring with a number of accelerators around the world, a handful in Europe, 500 startups worldwide. I run a company called Keen. You'll see our new product announced in a few weeks called printmo.co. It's a marketplace for print, so think Airbnb for print. You can think of it that way. And also, we have a new upstart fund, seed fund for Europe. You'll be hearing a lot about next year. So happy to meet all of you throughout the next few days and talk in detail about these things and more. So let's talk about what is pitching like a boss. It's an American expression, like a boss. People familiar with what that means, right? So boss means having confidence, right? And confidence is not about being cocky, it's about knowing your information. So a little bit of a grammar lesson. You have to know what you're talking about. So first and foremost, if you walk into a pitch or you come in and tell me about your company, if I know more about your industry, about what you're doing than you do, about your competitors, you're in trouble, right? So first and foremost, always do your homework, right? Be prepared. So who and why are you pitching, right? I already kind of started telling you about this. The first people you will be pitching your idea to will be your family. So they allow you to do this crazy startup thing, right? You will also be pitching co-founders, employees, etc. If you cannot convince somebody of your vision, it's just a hallucination, right? So you have to be very convincing in your passion on why you're doing this, what is the problem that you're solving, and who you're talking to. So think about who and why you're pitching. And very important thing with a pitch, it's not just a story that you're telling, it has a call to action. And call to action means you want to, the person you were talking to, you want them to do something now, not later, right? When you're raising your first money, the most challenging thing you're going to face is getting those first investors to be motivated to write that check now, instead of telling you, yeah, that's great. Let me know when you have a lead investor and then we'll join you. How many of you have heard that before? Yeah, a few? All right, so there's a few different types of pitches. when you're presenting your startup. The first is your 90-second elevator pitch. And the call to action on that type of pitch is to get the meeting. Right? So think about what you're trying to achieve before you start telling somebody everything about your startup. The only thing you need to do is get them interested to have a meeting with you. So what does that mean? You take out all the extra crap, all the jargon, all the technical information, and you get somebody interested in how interesting the problem that you're solving is and why they should talk to you more. Think about that. Right? It's not about getting as much information as you can into 90 seconds. It's about getting the right information to get that person motivated to meet with you and talk with you more. Okay? So when you're writing that little story and you're going to memorize it and you're going to tell everybody about it, think about that first and foremost. We'll come back to the content in a second. The next type of pitch you have is the good old public pitch. Right? So at a conference, at a demo day, etc. And if you're in a conference, how many companies pitching at the conference? 15. Okay. So there's 15 companies, right? Each investor in the room that writes checks will think of only 2 or 3 companies that they're going to want to follow up with after they see the pitch. So number one job is to stand out, to be one of those 15, the one of maybe 2 or 3 that people remember, right? That's your number one job in a public pitch. And the second is get the meeting, right? Get somebody to come talk to you, get them interested more. Let them ask you questions, answer their questions, get them interested, right? So what does that mean? Again, you don't need to show big charts and put in as much information as you can. All you have to do is stand out and get the meeting. Keep it simple. Number one error that people make is put way too much information into their pitch. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now, if you are successful with the first or the second pitch, you get to do this one. This is the one-on-one meeting. This is where you prepare 20 minutes of information, maybe a little bit more detail, that shows that you know what you're doing with your numbers, etc. But if you're successful, it'll stretch into an hour meeting of questions. It's interactive. This is where it comes back to knowing your shit, knowing what you're talking about. Because investors, you might be doing it for the first time, but you're playing poker against somebody that plays it all day, every day. And they will ask you questions both to learn about your business, but mostly to try to get to know you and understand, is this a person I can trust? Are they smart? Are they smarter than the average person to be able to start this particular business? Do they have some advantage? Right? So you really have to know, I can't overemphasize it enough, you really have to know your information and your business. Okay? Let's talk about content for your presentation. Right? And depending on how long your presentation, you're going to have various lengths and details in your presentation. But each one of these steps. So first things first. If this is a real business, if you already have data and some kind of traction, you need to talk about that first. Nothing matters more than traction. Why? Because if your business is already working, that means everything else on the list is checked off. Technology, check. It's doable. Team knows what they're doing, check. If you have sales, you have growth, all these things are working. So if you have a quickly growing startup, you want to start with this because that one thing will get investors' attention more than anything else. Right? This is the difference between this is a concept to we just started to this thing is working and this rocket is taking off and you better be on it. If you start off with it, you get people's attention and you hold their attention, right? So very important. So if you have traction, lead with traction. Keep that in mind. If you don't, then you can't, right? That's a question I get, the big follow-up question I get after this. Well, what if we don't have traction? Well, then you don't have traction. You can't lead with it. But very important thing is to start off as, who is the customer? What's the problem? Before I'm interested in listening to your solution and what technology you're using, I need to get context. I need to understand what problem you're solving and who is the customer. Without that context, it's impossible to judge whether you picked the right technology or you're just throwing a bunch of technical jargon at me because you haven't really thought about the market, right? So you always start with who's the customer, what's the problem. Right? This could be a use case. This could be stated as, businesses have such and such and such problem. right? So all of a sudden it's understandable. Okay, is this a problem or is this kind of a nice to have or an inconvenience? We'll come back to that in a second. So it has to be a painkiller, not a vitamin. It has to be not a nice to have, but this really changes your customers' lives. Think about that. It cannot be an incremental improvement. If it's an incremental improvement, it's going to be very difficult for you to get customers, especially at first, whether it's B2B and you're selling subscriptions, or it's like this new social network, Elo. My bet is in a year, it's going to be a long-forgotten trending topic on Twitter and Facebook, because it's not different enough to motivate people and really be a big challenger. If you want to change an industry, if you want to change something big, you have to be twice as good at half the price. You cannot be 5% better and a little bit cheaper. You cannot be just cheaper, or you cannot come in and say, well, we have better design, or we have more features. If you're competing against a big company and you're 3 people, and maybe you are a genius and you came up with some new features that they don't have, how long do you think it's going to take them to catch up to you? Right? You have to be completely different, and you have to solve a painful problem. Right? You have to be honest with yourself and realize, is this a problem or is this a nice to have? If it's a nice to have, I recommend you do not waste your non-refundable lifetime, 5 years, 10 years, on something that is not going to make a big difference in the world. You have to be honest with yourself, right? You can always make more money, you can always raise more money, but you can never have more of your own time. So be very honest with yourself. So to show that it is a big pain, not a vitamin, you have to show evidence and make it obvious. It has to be obvious to somebody that doesn't know your industry. It cannot be something that, well, if you knew our industry, you would understand. No, it has to be super simple and very easy to understand in general business terms. Okay? Another way, and very important way, to both get the competition question out of the way and to show again that this is a problem is by showing that there's, oh, we can't see anything here. Well, there's different kinds of light bulbs, right? But the question is, how is this problem currently being solved? If you come out on stage and say, we have no competition, you're sunk, right? That means there's no problem. There are other ways that people are solving this problem right now. And it may not be direct competition. Maybe you have a new, interesting way that new technology paradigm came along and allowed you to solve a problem in a more convenient way. But if it is a problem, people are trying to solve it right now. And that is your competition. How are they currently, so if there's a specific problem statement, how are they currently dealing with that problem? Right? If they're not, then that's your clue that it's a nice to have, it's not a problem. Again, right? You have to come back to this. Make sure it's very painful. So again, if you come out and say we have no competitors, that means there's no problem. That means you have no business. There's no market. So don't ever come out on stage and say, we have no competition. Drop the mic and go. Okay. So you have no business, right? It's not a problem. Now, when you've created this context for your audience, who's the customer, what's the problem, how's it currently being solved, it is a really painful problem, now they're ready to hear about your solution. Only now. Now they can start making value judgments on whether this is an interesting solution or not, and whether it's unique or not. Right? Does that make sense? Are the current solutions hard, expensive, they're inconvenient some way? How are you different and better? Being just different for the sake of being different is not enough. You have to be different and really, really better, obviously better. Not to somebody that just knows your industry, but to any average smart person. Okay? That is when you pitch the solution. And when you're presenting your solution, it has to be obvious again that it's better, faster, cheaper, new, etc. So every decade or so, or now less, there's a new technology paradigm. And it allows you to solve the same old problems in business and for consumers in new, more convenient ways. Right? So your advantage might be, well, this used to be solved just as a SaaS or as a desktop application. Now it's mobile. And it's more convenient because of that. Next paradigm is perhaps wearable computing. So wearable computing will allow you to solve all these problems all over again in a much more convenient way. And that's one way for you to say, well, there's a whole bunch of competition that built their businesses around the last paradigm, and they can't change really fast. But we are starting from scratch, and we're building the solution based on this new technology paradigm. Right? That's a very distinct advantage. Think about that. Now, once you've explained who's the customer, what's the problem, what's the competition landscape, why are you better, right? You kind of explain what you do. The next thing is, well, how does it work? Right? And I like a mini demo. 1, 2, 3. User does this, then they do that, and then they get that. 3 screenshots, very quick, very easy for people to understand what the product experience is, just for them to get, again, some context. You don't need to dive into detail. You don't need to get the product manager disease. The product manager disease is, I want to explain every single feature because we spent so much time building this, and we thought of everything, right? Are you guys familiar with this? Yeah? I'm gonna give you a demo of every single nook and cranny of this product. Like, no, that's not the point of this presentation. The point of this presentation is for them to get a general idea of what the product does and kind of a feel for how it works, right? Now, we've gotten all that out of the way. Let's make sure that this is a business, right? You have to shift gears and then say, okay, here's the customer, what's the problem? Here's how it's going to be solved. Here's our solution. Here's our product. It works. You already know that we have some traction, so this thing is not just PowerPoint, but it's an actual piece of software or hardware, right? Now let's talk about how this thing can be a big business, a big, interesting business. So we want a big fucking market. Pardon my French. But I want to emphasize, right, big market. Why is a big market important? Because if you're going to grow fast, and this is a startup, like a venture-backed startup, this is not a coffee shop where you take your life savings and you're going to have 5 employees for the rest of your life and you're happy. This is an experiment that will then, once you prove the experiment, figure out the business model, should scale very quickly. And it will scale very quickly only in a giant business. And if it's an interesting industry, you're going to have lots of competitors. So you're not going to get a big chunk of that industry, probably. You'll get a small chunk, but that still has to give you, it's called venture returns. It still has to be a potential for 100 million revenue business within 5 years. Right? There has to be a clear path for that. One of the easiest ways of doing that is actually jumping into a quickly growing market. Right? So if you're coming into an old market that's not moving very fast, all the growth is going to come just from your efforts. But if you come into an industry and become one of the leaders early on, and the industry is growing 20% a year, guess what? You're going to grow with it. Right? That's very important. You're going to grow right with the industry. So this is very interesting. This is why you see venture capital go in 5 to 10 year trends and themes. Because that trend comes along and it grows very fast, and all the companies in that trend rise very quickly with it. Right? Without having to necessarily do it all on their own. Think about that too, when you're picking what type of problems you're solving, right? It's a little bit of a, how many of you are musicians in the room? Any musicians? Yeah? Okay, so there's a concept for rock musicians about selling out. Everybody familiar with that? Like becoming commercial. Well, guess what, with a startup, if you don't like pain and if you want to build a successful business, you have to sell out to a certain extent. You have to follow the trends because it will be much easier for you to build a business that's in a particular trend, that's part of a particular wave, than for you to fight everybody and try to do everything on your own. Right? This is why you see these waves of businesses come along. Okay? So we just figured out what the industry is, how big it is, how quickly it's growing. Great. How are you going to get a piece of it? Business model. This is when you talk about, this is not about the, here's 5 years of our projections and all the numbers are bullshit and here's a hockey stick curve. That's not interesting. What's interesting is a believable walkthrough of the business model. We do a subscription and we charge this much per customer and they stick around for this long and their cost of acquisition is approximately this much. It's a little arithmetic. That's much more interesting, right? Because if the industry is really big and your unit economics, how much does it cost you to get one customer, how long does it take, and how much are they worth to you? If you have that first information, any investor can then take that and extrapolate it and understand what the company needs to grow those sales. So it's very important for you to, yes, show a clear path to 100 million revenue, but it's much more important for you to have a good handle on the business model. Okay? And there are two types of business models. There's the symmetric business model, B2B, for example. I solve a customer's problem, customer pays me, right? I sell them something, they pay me. Very simple. And there's asymmetric business models. This is usually advertising driven. Asymmetric could be very tricky because you need a huge audience for it to be very interesting. 10 million users is the new 1 million users. Right? For you to have like a new social network and for it to be interesting, you have to have like 10 million users. Because if you start selling advertising against that, those numbers are very, very low as far as how much revenue you can get out of it. All right, so think about how are you going to structure this. Sometimes you have hybrid business models, but you need to have a good handle on it. And it's not something that you can walk into a meeting with a serious investor and say, we don't know, but we'll think about it later. No, you need to think about it now. Startups are fun. It's fun to go to conferences. It's fun to go to a bar and everybody complain to each other, what sucks or what's fun. But at a certain point, your audience is business. You're building a business. Right? You have to think about this right away. Now, very important word you'll learn is scale. Right? Again, this is the difference between a lifestyle business and a venture-backed business. So what does scale mean? Scale in this context means revenue per employee. Okay? So at full speed, and these numbers are about 1.5 years old, so it might be a little out of date, but close enough. The point is, for example, McDonald's. They make $64,000 in revenue per employee, but they have 1.7 million employees worldwide. Now, if you walk into a VC firm and say, we're going to do a McDonald's business model, you're not going to raise any money. Right? It just takes way too much capital and time to build that type of business. Right? On the opposite end, you have Craigslist that does 3.6 million per employee, but they have something like 25 employees. Also not very interesting. Where you want to be is somewhere between Amazon and Apple, right, if you're lucky. So let's say you're shooting for about $1 million per employee. This is also an interesting test. When you walk in and you have a meeting with an investor and you show them this hockey stick curve and you show them that in 3 years we're going to be the fastest growing revenue company of all in the history of companies and we're going to be making 100 million revenue per employee, then it's very obvious to that investor that you don't know what you're talking about and you're likely going to fail. Right? So my little piece of advice for you is shoot for something million per employee. It's very hard to make projections for revenue, but at full speed, that's considered great. Okay? Question? If you can do $1 million per employee in the first year, congratulations. Let's say you're doing 5-year projections, and everybody says we're going to be the perfect company within 5 years. You're kind of shooting for, at year 5, you're kind of in that range. You want to get there. You'll never, 99.99999% of the companies won't get there, but it's a good target. It's a reasonable, achievable target.
Also, like acquiring a customer, as you said, is a much better financial number than
yes.
5-year predictions.
Absolutely.
Would you put that number on a 2-minute pitch?
If you have unit economics, so question was, would you put customer acquisition numbers? Yeah, absolutely. If you have early data on how much it costs you to acquire a customer, this is your signal to investors that you know how to grow this business. Big challenge in Europe, actually, huge challenge, is that there's a lack of marketing and sales knowledge. And all of this, it's easy to get your first 10, 20 customers or get 100 people to sign up, but then most companies get stuck. Most startups get stuck and they don't know how to grow. Right? They don't know how to turn the crank, as they say, on the business. So what you want to do is actually figure that out as quickly as you can. How much does it cost you to acquire a customer? Right? And that's especially in Europe, you'll stand out as a business if you have that information. Very, very important. There's a big chasm, right? So there's Jeffrey Moore Jumping the Chasm. That's kind of a different thing. Anybody read that book? Yeah? But in startups, the chasm is from your first customers to repeatable business model. And we know for every dollar we spend on Google advertising, we get $10 in revenue in 3 months, 6 months, a year. Right? That's much more important for you to measure and showcase that this is a positive business. For every dollar that gets invested into advertising, out the other end comes twice as much revenue, or more, or whatever it is. Right? So those numbers are much more interesting. But you'll still get asked, okay, how big is this thing going to be? You just do the math. You put your business model into a spreadsheet and extrapolate it, 60 months. So the beautiful thing about startups is, and why everything's growing so fast, is that we have internet-driven customer acquisition models, right? So kind of what we were just talking about. You can measure everything. You have to measure everything. If you're not a data-driven startup, you will lose. Going viral is not a business plan, right? So for every company that went viral, there are very few things that are truly organically viral. Most of them created that effect on their own. They understood how to hit the gas pedal, and they hit the gas pedal with advertising money, whatever they did, and they did it very much on purpose. And they tweak things, and they monitor things, and they're very customer-driven as far as how they change the product. So a growth hacker, right? You all heard the term growth hacker. A growth hacker is a marketing person that understands how they need to change the product, right? They get the feedback from the market, and that's usually data. How many people clicked, how long they stayed, how many went away, and they know where to change the product to improve those numbers, right? A growth hacker is not a magician. A growth hacker is a new term for a highly technical marketing manager, a person that understands how the product needs to be changed to improve the numbers on the marketing side. Okay? Now, very important thing, and most important thing early on, your main ingredient is your team. Right? So once you went through this whole thing, you guys know what this is, right? This show? A-Team? Okay. Sometimes, I'm in rooms and it's a very young audience, like, who are these guys? So everybody in the A-Team had their specialty, right? And your team should look something like that, right? More specifically, you have a balanced startup team made of 3 particular points. One, very important, is you have to have domain expertise. You have to know your business better than the average smart person. Like, okay, maybe you've convinced me that that's an interesting problem, there's a market opportunity, but why are you going to be the guy that solves it, or your team? Why not somebody else? You have to have some kind of insight into that problem, some kind of special experience, some kind of special expertise that somebody else doesn't have. The average smart person, they're called. Engineering. You have to be able to build a product. Yes, maybe you're a smart Stanford MBA and you can't code and you've outsourced, the prototype. But beyond that, you are in the software business or hardware business. You need to be able to build a product. You cannot outsource your core competency. Right? Not in a startup. Okay? And design. Design is crucial. Design is become very important even in B2B. Because people have been trained with very nice consumer products, and they expect the same thing in business now as well, where that experience, especially if you're in mobile world, somebody downloads your app, you have 15 seconds to convince them to open it again, or they'll delete it. Right? If you get half the people to open your app for the second time, you've succeeded. Right? Think about that. And it's all about that new user experience, that first time they use it. Right? The customer does not care what kind of database you use, what kind of stack you build on. They do not care. They care about the experience. The experience for them is your product. Think about that. It's very important. I'm totally biased because I'm a designer, but you have to lead with design. You start with design, and you backfill the engineering to make all of that work, not the other way around. You don't start building a database, and then you kind of do design at the end. That doesn't work. What is your unfair advantage? At this stage, unfair advantage, just to be clear, it's not being light, it's being strong, right? That's the unfair advantage here. You want to, that unfair advantage early on, in most of your cases, will be your team. It'll be the special knowledge that you have that others don't, okay? You have to showcase that. And show off accomplishments. Have you raised money? Who did you raise money from? That's very important as well. It's a very important signal. Do you have some kind of partnerships? Because that proves that the industry believes in your product. If the biggest company in your industry is a partner of yours, that should tell investors, hey, maybe they're doing something interesting in this industry because otherwise this company will not partner with them and spend the resources, right? And growth. That's the most important thing. You're showing growth. And whatever product you're working on, find out what's considered good for your product, right? So if it's a free product, double-digit growth per week is good. If it's a paid product, double-digit growth per month is good. So if you have a SaaS, 20% a month growth is good, paid SaaS. Right? If you have a social network, you want like 20% per week or per day. Otherwise, it's going to take a very long time for you to get there. And you have to be very calm and collected. Again, you're playing poker. You're playing poker with people that play it every day, and it's your first time. Right? So make sure that you're calm, you're collected, you know your information, you're confident, and that you do not lose your cool and do not lose that poker game. Okay? A couple of words on your presentation itself. So your deck, this is the news, right? So this is your deck. It's your over-the-shoulder graphic. Did you notice that I don't have a lot of stuff for you to read on my slides? That's because I'm the presentation. That is just a way for you to kind of keep in mind what I'm talking about at this particular moment. It's also a way for me to keep on track with the different themes. It's not like I wrote this out and memorized it and now I'm kind of reading it back to you. You have to be natural in the way you present it as well. Again, if you know your information, you can do that as well. Okay? So your deck should be very, very simple. And rule of thumb is there's no paragraphs, there's no bullets. Forget the PowerPoint default templates. That's all wrong. Sorry, Microsoft. Your slides should have a strong visual element, and they exist because 80% of people learn visually. Right? So that's why you have slides. That's good. A picture tells 1,000 words, and each one of your statement on the slide should be like a newspaper headline. Okay? Not a sentence with a period at the end, but a newspaper headline. Okay? Here's a newspaper headline. Body language is crucial. So when you're presenting, the way you present, so I learned some of my presenting from somebody that does a lot of teaching, Jerry, I forgot his name, last name. Anyway, he's very famous for analyzing political debates. Right? You put the debate on mute. You don't listen to what they're actually saying. You can tell by their body language who's winning. You have two people standing on two opposite sides of the stage. They're talking. You can see who's winning by their body language. So here's my quick tips for you for body language. And I'll post these slides. You'll have reference. But this is what you want to keep in mind. And again, you want to have your information down so well that when you're on stage presenting, you are focused on your performance. And your performance is the following. Confident stance. What does that mean? Right? So there's what's called a parasympathetic response. There's nothing natural about standing in front of a big group of people. Right? The parasympathetic response is the fight or flight. It's a very natural response. People get nervous, and they show it in two ways. They fight or they flight. So flight is somebody that does a lot of this on stage for no reason. They're moving around and walking. They're distracting the audience. Right? Don't do that. Don't do the dance. Right? There's people that kind of do it in place. And don't do this body wrap thing. Right? So body wrap, this is you're protecting yourself. You're nervous. Somebody's going to fight you. Right? So don't do this. Stand confident. That means your feet shoulder width apart. You're talking to the audience, having a conversation. Open hand gestures. Again, not this. Don't hug yourself. Everything will be okay. You want to talk with open hand gestures. And you don't want to point, right, because I'm like accusing you. It's like a handshake, right? That's a much nicer gesture. And people really respond to that. Open hands, right? You're using your hands. Pretend you're Italian. Right? How many Italians in the room? No? I lived in Italy for a little while. Speak loud and clear. So I have a microphone, but sometimes things go wrong. And person in the back of the room should be able to hear you clearly. When you're presenting, and most of you will be presenting in English, it's not your first language, you want to use simple words, you want to talk slowly, you don't want to jumble up your words. It's not about, let me get through the presentation as quickly as possible. It's about getting people in the audience to listen to what you're saying. Speak loud and clear. Don't read your slides. Nothing worse than doing this. Right? Reading a paragraph of text that somebody in the audience can read while they're, turning your butt to the audience. That's not good, right? When you're flipping a slide, you want to give the audience a chance, maybe 1-2 seconds, to absorb the information because they're seeing it for the first time. You want to let it sink in. And then you start talking. But you don't need to turn around and start reading your slides. Right? You only talk to eyes. If you remember one thing from this whole presentation, this is probably the most important. When you talk to eyes, that means you're having a one-on-one conversation with everybody in the audience. So whether there's 100 people in the room or 20,000 people in a stadium, when you pick a person in the audience and you give them a phrase, you deliver them a sentence, you pick another person there, it'll do a couple of things for you. First of all, the audience will feel like you're talking to them. The other thing is it will slow you down to a more natural pace. When people are nervous, they start speaking really quickly because their heart rate goes up, their vision narrows, and they're just trying to get off stage as quickly as they can. But if you pretend to yourself, this whole, imagine the audience naked, that doesn't really work in most audiences. You want to have a series of one-on-one conversations. And it doesn't matter how many people are in the audience, because as soon as you start doing that, you'll relax and you'll be much more natural when you're presenting. And last and probably most important is smile. Like we had actually, I put on a big conference in Kiev, and we had a Turkish guy come. He was part of the startup competition, one of the finalists. And he was really loud, that's good, but then he was also kind of very tense. And the response from when we're doing a dress rehearsal was like, "Are you angry?" like relax, smile. Like people want to have a good time, they want to be engaged. They don't want to hear somebody that's upset or something like that, right? So just learn information enough to where you can focus on these things when you're presenting, right? The information you're presenting, you should be so good at it, so well practiced that you're there to perform. You're a musician on stage. You're a singer. You already know the lyrics, okay? You're there to hold the mic and pretend that you're doing a show, right? So if you want the slides, I'll post them on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. Great quote from Paulo Coelho. And one more thing. I'm going to be publishing a book next year, which is basically everything that I know. Right? If you want the first chapter for free, you can grab it. Just go to founderco.com, and you can download it now. All right? And I'll close it off with another little pitch.
I've got some business idea that I just want to tell you about, and I'll be a fool if...
Very quickly.
What is the most popular thing in the world?
Music.
No.
Tell me.
Ice cream.
Okay.
Everyone has it. And what is the problem with ice cream?
I have no idea.
It drips.
Okay.
So my idea is what?
To make a drip-proof ice cream.
No. Oh, that's a fucking brilliant idea, this. All right, whatever. You ain't going to come out with that, though.
No, I promise you I won't.
Well, my idea is to come out with just like these ice cream gloves that make the ice cream not go on your hands and make it all well sticky. And also keep your hands warm when you is eating the ice cream.
Okay.
Is you in or is you in?
Okay, well, it sounds like a good idea, and I hope you make a lot of money. Good luck, folks. It's been nice seeing you. You take care of yourself, okay?
Well, is you going to be in on that?
Well, it sounds like an interesting...
We've got like P. Diddy is going to be in it.
Good.
It is ice cream.
Do you want me to eat this?
No.
No, okay.
What's my idea?
Lay it on me.
The ice cream glove. That's a C, which means that you can't nick it.
All right.
Have you seen one of these things before?
Sure,
Everyone in school learns these things.
sure,
Venn diagrams.
sure.
People who like ice cream. People who has hands.
Sure.
What's this section here? That's our target market, isn't it?
Okay.
We did an intranet search for ice cream. We come back with 6,121 result. We did an intranet search for the gloves. How much results did we get? 325, 0, 113. So you times those together, what does you get? This is just people on the internet looking in. 203 zillion, whatever, 496,400, and then a 1. Check this out. If all those people bought one glove
Right.
at $19.99,
Right.
just one glove, business would be worth, wait for it,
I'm waiting.
that much. That is such a big number, couldn't fit it that way. That in English, 34.6 million billion dollars. How does we promote this company? We promote it with the strongest image.
All right. All right, that's different.
Naked woman on a horse. Shaven or with like bush, whatever. You know, money talks, pubes walk.
All right.
This may be the worst idea I've ever heard.
I actually don't dislike the idea.
Safe, respect.
Yeah, but I don't dislike the idea. You could use it, you know. There's something to it. This is not going to happen.
I've got another business idea.
Okay, what is that?
What's this?
That is a skateboard. No, it is a toothbrush. No.
Don't
Okay, good. What is it?
grow up, brain. What is it? We'll tell you what it is.
Oh.
It's a hoverboard.
I don't understand what you mean.
It's a hoverboard. As you've seen Back to the Future.
Yeah.
As you've seen the bit where they jump on the board and it flies around.
Yeah.
It's in the future.
Yeah.
That film must have been about 10 years ago. No one has even thought about making that thing.
But it doesn't do that.
It doesn't do it yet. That's where you lot come in. You come up with the science.
We don't do that. This is nothing. It's a film.
Well,
It's a
they must have
story.
used the board from somewhere. They made one of them that
No.
worked.
No.
So how did he jump on it and fly all around and all the chases then?
It's called special effects. How do they do anything in a movie? Good luck. You gonna put on the glove before you shake my hand? Okay, good luck, man.
All right. So, thank you very much. I'll be... look forward to working with you guys today. I am accused of being tough, but I'm tough because I'm not going to, what's called, blow sunshine up your ass, because you're going to go to the outside world, to the business world, and you're going to have very tough lessons there. So it's very important that people that you talk to are very honest and very direct with you to help you get better. And that's what I try to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Vitaly.